everyone, and welcome to Crime in Court. This is the case of Richard Allen, the Delphi homicides. We have been doing a deep dive on this case for probably about a year now, almost a year now, and we still are lacking answers in this case, but Richard Allen has been convicted and sentenced. In my last video on this, I went over the sentencing. I gave you guys a lot of different perspectives. We went over some of the victim impact statements. We heard from Carrie Timmons, who is Libby's mother, and also Mike Patty, who is Libby's step grandfather. So and there was some odd things that was said, especially from Mike Patty, in my opinion. We also went over the press conference that took place after the sentencing, and we watched as the basically all of the law enforcement involved came up to the mic and said, "We're not liars, trust us." So there's that. So, but now the gag order has been lifted, which as of December 20th. So now law enforcement is coming forward and they're speaking. So today we're going to be going over Jerry Holman's odd press tour. And I'm calling it odd because in one of his interviews he talks about Richard Allen being odd and he says the word odd about a million times. So I'm calling Jerry Holman's press tour odd. And this is going to be part one. There's going to be several parts, or at least three parts now. If he continues his tour, there may be more. So just letting you know. But up first, before we get into Jerry Holman's um, odd press tour, I wanted to replay this, and I wanted to replay it in the last episode, but it was really already, there was so much in it. So this is actually, we're going to go, let me switch here. We're going to watch a clip, or we're going to watch a little bit of this. So this is from Court TV. This was after Richard Allen's sentencing. This is Vinnie Politan. If you don't know who he is, he's pretty even keel when he reports on things. Like he sees things pretty objectively, for the most part. But the channel itself, like I think he's part owner of the channel. I'm not really sure, but I thought like when I think of Court TV, I think of Vinny. But anyways, so other people on Core TV haven't necessarily been as pro defense, but Vinny definitely seems like he gets it. So I'm going to actually have here. Let me move the whatchamacallums. The closed captioning. All right, so that's up at the top, and we're going to listen to a little bit about what happened that day, the day of the sentencing. We're also going to hear from Bob Mata, and he's with the Defense Diaries podcast and YouTube channel, and also oh gosh, Erica Morse, I think her name is. They'll say it again. I can't. My brain can't remember details, but a woman who is the like investigator. Let me see. Is there a description here? No. Oh, yes. Erica Morse joins Court TV. She was the private investigator for the defense. So Erica Morse, and she has some really interesting things that she's saying, and I guarantee she knows so much more than she can actually say because it sounds like she's being very careful in her wording here, but there's definitely some shady stuff that has been going on since the very beginning. So let's hear what they have to say.
And to me, that is a big part of that story still tonight. Now, if you look on the other side of the courtroom and all this, for Richard Allen, was justice denied? That's what he's claiming, that justice was denied to him, that the truth did not come out inside that courtroom.
I just realized I have this on speed 2 because that's how fast I listen sometimes. So let me take it down to 1.25 here for you guys.
That the jury didn't hear what he and his attorneys had to say, that he is an innocent man. Now, the jury has spoken and said, no, you're not an innocent man. You're guilty beyond any and all reasonable doubt. But he's holding on to that as he gets ready to serve his sentence of 130 years in prison. Obviously, there will be appeals. Maybe they'll win, maybe they'll lose, we don't know. But as we sit here tonight, Richard Allen has no chance but for an appeal to ever see the light of day after this sentence. But let's go back to what has transpired here. This was an unusual trial. It's extremely unusual in many different facets. The state of Indiana had recently changed its guidance and its rules on cameras in the courtroom and was allowed to permit them. And that's why we have this image of this judge, because she permitted cameras inside the courtroom for about 15 seconds of this entire ordeal. And then tossed the cameras out because she said that someone did something with the video that they weren't supposed to do. Still can't figure it out. But that's just from our perspective. What's more important is the actual trial, the search for the truth. And this was a case where the judge took the defendant's counsel of choice, like his attorneys, and took him off the case. I've never seen that before. They had to take this to the appellate courts to get put back on the case, a case that they're doing pro bono. But his defense attorneys had to litigate and had to fight to be able to represent him. That is strange. That is bizarre. The overriding gag order and the secretive nature of everything that's happening in this case was unusual. And then the rulings in a case where there was a task force that was looking at certain suspects, and there was a portion of that task force, not all of them, but more than one person, several people in that task force that thought this whole thing was the work of a ritualistic killing by Odinists. The defense agreed. That was going to be their defense. And the judge didn't allow any of it. Didn't allow the jury to hear anything really from the defense about anyone else involved in the case, including the man whose property the girls were found on. This is strange.
Ron Logan.
He was the owner of the property. He also lied about where he was at the time of the murders. And jury heard nothing about that either. It was really bizarre, the rulings. And the investigation, you go back to it, that was unusual as well. Because the man they ended up charging, Richard Allen, the man who's convicted, the man who's serving the rest of his life in prison, the day that they put out that image of the bridge guy, he called the tip line. And they followed up on that, and he said, I was there that day. And then they sat on that information for 5 years. In the biggest case that they've ever had, the biggest investigation that they seemingly were stumped for 5 years, the guy who they convicted called the tip line himself and said, I was there, and they did zero follow-up on that. Like, how could you, in a case like that, how is not the first thing, right? Who was there that day? All right, guys, we're gonna take a fresh look at this. Who was there that day? Like, it was unusual. Everything was. So, speaking of unusual, the superintendent of the
That's Vinnie Politan saying everything is unusual about the investigation, which it's true. It is. There's so much shadiness going on in this, and he sees it. He's probably one of the first, if not the first, true like media source that has actually reported on the angle. They've reported on the Franks memo, the Odinists, and all that, but they don't really give it a whole lot of credence. But Vinny is the only one that really seems to kind of believe some of what the defense is saying.
The Indiana State Police spoke today after the sentencing of Richard Allen. There's been a gag order, like a broad gag order, like an overriding gag order. But now he was apparently able to finally say something. Take a listen.
I wish you all could have been in the courtroom today and heard the victim impact statements. I'll always remember them. And I hope you'll get the transcripts and read what was said and try and understand the context of those words, even though you weren't in the courtroom. Over the course of these last many years, there have been many investigative strategies. Any notion of a cover-up, any notion of us deciding the outcome of this, any notion of any connection to anything else is not correct. It's not correct. I've never been a detective in my entire lifetime, but I get to represent some of the best on the planet Earth. And I listened to them intently. And when they made strategy decisions associated with what the next steps would be, my job was to support them, and I stand by those decisions, every single one of them. The gag order.
Yeah. So we're not going to watch all of this, but I just wanted to play the very beginning of this. And we're going to skip now to forward to where Vinny starts talking some more about the case. And then we'll get to Bob Mata and Erica.
Understand that we all tried the best we could. That should be the message to us and to our kids and to this most amazing place we call the United States of America.
I don't follow it completely, what he was saying, and I'll just briefly say the solution to everything that he was pointing out is transparency. And the
Bingo.
lack of transparency created all those things he was talking about. And there
Bingo.
was no transparency in the state of Indiana through the investigation and through the trial. And he started off by saying, I wish you could be in the courtroom. Well, guess what? We could have been. We could have had our cameras in there and our microphones. We would have seen Richard Allen. We would have seen the witnesses. We would have heard the evidence. You want people.
Yep. But Judge Gull said, nope. How many people actually? There were so many media requests. I mean, so many. And she denied every single one without any reason, just denied everything outright.
You want the narrative to change on social media? Let the people see the trial. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Everything you complained about gets fixed with transparency,
Yep.
which you all lacked, led by the judge. He's like going bonkers on social media and the media, like what we did was wrong.
Yeah, talking about how we shouldn't be talking about this case, and if we don't, he actually said, if we don't like justice, go to another country, because what they did for Libby and Abby was justice. And if we don't like justice, move to another country. Well, I don't think that they did a justice for Abby and Libby and their families. I believe that the perp or perpetrators are still out there. And Richard Allen is an innocent man who was just convicted to 130 years. He was also put into solitary confinement and tortured for like 15 months or something like that. I can't remember. But it was a long time. And think about it in your shoes. Be like, uh, look at it from his perspective. If you were in those shoes and you were facing 130 years for a crime you didn't commit, and you had a rigged system, a completely unethical and biased judge, law enforcement that lied their asses off, how would you feel? I'd be so devastated, but we are told that Rick is doing okay, as okay as can be. He's found religion, I believe, so he is holding very firm in that, and that's getting him through. And I'm sure the hope of an appeal is probably getting him through. And there is a good chance, I will say, of an appeal, even though an appeal is never a sure thing. But there's such horrible atrocities that were performed against Richard Allen in this case that I think this is going to be a huge um, civil rights case in the future, or it'll get settled and it won't be public. But I think Richard Allen is going to eventually one day walk free and have lots of money in his pocket because of what they've done to him. Maybe I'm just an optimist, or I'm just being optimistic, trying to believe that Richard Allen will see the light of day again. But I believe that good will conquer evil. It just seems too difficult to comprehend now because there's Richard Allen's case, Karen Reed's case. There's so many cases of corruption and cover up and law enforcement um, using the law against us, weaponizing our laws against us. And it's pretty horrific. And we don't live in a free country, no matter what you think. Anyways, sorry, I get off on tangents. Here we go. Let's continue.
You should have been in that courtroom. You told us not to be there. All right, I've done enough. I'm off the soapbox. Joining us live from Indiana, Court TV senior producer Barbara McDonald, who was there and was in the courtroom, and I'm so glad she was. Wow.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So Barbara McDonald, she's with Core TV, senior producer. She was in attendance. She posted on X, when they were allowed to go out and post on their breaks and stuff, because they weren't even allowed to have their phones in the courtroom. So they couldn't even do live tweeting, which is ridiculous. But that's what it is.
That was strange. That was really strange. I'm sorry. I'm just going to call it like I see it, because he was throwing shade at the media. He was throwing shade at social media. Transparency is the disinfectant. Go down to Florida, learn how to do it. I'm sorry. Barbara, tell us what happened inside at the sentencing.
It was a very quick hearing, Vinny. It was about an hour and 5 minutes. The defense chose not to bring any witnesses, not talk about any evidence, not say much of anything at all. They filed a sentencing memo that they said spoke for what they had to say. So we heard from one witness, Jerry Holeman, the lead investigator for Indiana State Police, and we heard from 6 family members of Abby and Libby in those victim impact statements that were very emotional and very angry, not only talking about everything that they've lost and the pain and the fear that they have lived with all these years, but also a lot of very harsh words for the defense, that some family members accused of re-victimizing them by some of the efforts that they took to defend Richard Allen from these charges, doing their job, essentially. And that carried over to the press conference as well, with several people commenting about the defense putting out this narrative through that Odinism report and things like that. One interesting moment in court was...
So again, they just keep blaming the defense like it's your fault for bringing this up. Not the fact that it happened and we have this Odin report that was created by 3 separate individual task members who came together, created this Odin report with their investigation, with what they revealed from their investigations. And yet here, everyone at the sentencing was blaming the defense, and they did it in the press conference too. How dare the defense talk about this and that? And we obeyed the gag order, but the defense didn't, and whatever else they said about the defense.
When Richard Allen was actually being sentenced and the judge was looking straight at him, she did not ask him to stand. And she said, she spoke about the carnage that he left behind and how that's going to cause generational trauma to these families. And then she paused, looked at him and said, and now you're going to roll your eyes at me like you've done throughout this trial. That was something that...
Now you're going to roll your eyes at me like you've done throughout this trial. If this evil, vile creature was talking down to me, condescending to me, and telling me all of this, and I know I didn't do it, I'd be rolling my eyes too. I'd be rolling my eyes at the unjust justice system and the unfair judge that is completely biased, completely ethical, has shown her hatred towards not only Richard Allen, but his defense team through all of her actions in these proceedings. I'd be rolling my eyes too. I'd be doing worse than rolling my eyes, to be clear. I'd be probably in contempt because I wouldn't be able to keep my mouth shut. But Richard Allen stayed composed and didn't speak out, but he rolled his eyes. If he even did. We don't know, because there were people that said that they never saw that. So we'll hear from that in a minute. But isn't this silly? You roll your eyes at me. That has nothing to do with his sentencing whatsoever. You obviously have some bias towards him.
That none of us in the gallery had been aware of. Obviously, we sit behind him in court. We can't...
None of them in the gallery were aware that he was rolling the eyes, but obviously they can't see his face.
See his face. I had not heard any allegations previously that he had been rolling his eyes during the trial. That was something I asked the prosecutor, or the prosecutor was asked about it during the press conference. And I think we have a little bit of that sound as well.
Okay, let's take a listen.
No, I had no idea. I heard Nick was asked that same question, and he didn't see it either. I bet the jury did. But again, the jury sees both sides, the state, the defense, the witnesses, Richard Allen, sees how people come and how they go, but even Nick didn't notice it.
Yeah, so nobody really noticed that in court at all, but perhaps the jury did, Vinny.
All right, let's get back to the press conference, Barbara. And by the way, when it comes to the family and everything else, that's why our cameras want to be there, to capture those moments so the public understands. Mm-hmm. Like it's radio silence, like it's nothing. I hope you read the transcripts. Nobody's going to read the transcripts, let's be honest.
I will.
Are you providing this? No, we've
I'll read the transcripts. However, they won't give us the transcripts willingly or easily. We got to fight for them. But we do know that the defense team has asked for them. So, they had to file something to ask for the transcripts. So they are forthcoming. They have to be transcribed at this point, and who knows how long that can take. And if the defense team gets them, who knows if they will be made public in some form or fashion. And if they give them to the defense, will they also give them to others? I don't know. I'm sure other people will do FOIAs and stuff. I have not. I should. I should think about doing a FOIA for that. I just have so much that I'm trying to keep track of here. Anyways, moving on here. Let's continue.
Could have seen and heard all of this to understand the case. How do you trust the system of justice? He's telling us how great the system is. I say that all the time. But how can people trust it if you don't see it in action? If everything is done in darkness? Crazy.
Absolutely. And there's so many ways that the cameras can be accommodated in court. Even the court can provide a camera in the back of the courtroom to make the process easier. And I think that was badly needed in this case.
Yep.
All right. So let's tell us about this press conference, because this was, and we showed a piece of it, but there was a lot more to this whole thing.
Yeah, so they did take a few questions. Only the prosecutor responded to the questions. At one point, somebody tried to ask Superintendent Carter a question, and Nick said he's not going to be answering right now. I'm answering the questions. And the question that I had was, throughout this process, they have said they can't clear all these other men that they looked at, some of the men that the defense talked about, other men, Ron Logan, Kegan Kline. And so that was my question, was now can you clear those men?
They can't or won't say that those men are cleared.
Caught the person that you say did this by himself. You have sentenced him to 130 years. Are those other men cleared? And it was an interesting response.
Now mean that all the other men are cleared? Can you use that word?
Who is all the other men?
The other men that were looked at during the course of the investigation that you always said we couldn't say.
Who is all the other men? Like, you don't know. But okay. She's saying that you said that you couldn't say that were cleared. All the men that you said you couldn't say were cleared. Can you say that they're cleared now?
If they're cleared, can you now say they're cleared?
I may not use that word cleared, but what I can tell you is we don't have any other evidence that ties them to the offense at this time.
And I asked Superintendent Carter about that when I had a chance to talk to him one-on-one after that press conference. Here's what he had to say.
We don't say clear to anybody. I appreciate the question. I appreciate it when you asked it in there. Human behavior is kind of interesting, isn't it? It's fascinating. And just because this trial is...
What kind of an answer is that? That's not an answer at all.
over, other than the appeal process, which is okay, that doesn't mean that somebody's not going to come forward and give us some additional information of what occurred maybe before the murders.
And that's rather interesting, what occurred before the murders. That was something I wanted to hear during the trial. What was exactly going on for Richard Allen in his head? What was going on in his life? And that was something we did not hear at trial. We only heard about what he did that day leading up to the murders. And so I think there's still a lot of unanswered questions for a lot of people, Vinny, that, I asked Superintendent Carter also, is the tip line going to stay open? And he said yes.
Interesting.
The tip line will remain open. Does that sound like a closed case to you? Closed cases don't have open tip lines. Just going to throw that out there. This case is not closed. This case is not solved. This case used a patsy, and that patsy's name is Richard Allen.
Well, you're in a much different perspective than most of us, right? You got to see the trial and hear the evidence, so you have something to draw upon. The rest of us, obviously, we listened to your reporting, et cetera, but we didn't get to experience, we didn't get to see it, we didn't get to hear it.
All right, sorry. Let me find here is where they come in, I think. They're talking about the timeline. So let's go over here.
Near Mears Gate entrance to the trails when she Betsy Blue at 2:30 to put together, right? Even though we didn't see the trial. But let me bring in some guests who did see the
Here
trial.
we go.
Joining me, criminal defense attorney, host of the Defense Diaries podcast, was in the courtroom for the trial, Bob Mata, and private investigator, worked on the case for nearly 2 years, is close with Richard Allen's family. Erica Morse is with us. Thank you both for being here. Erica, it's been a while since I've talked to you about this case. So let's talk about this case. Let's start first with Richard Allen. His wife, Kathy, wasn't there today, right?
No one from the Allen family attended. That was an ongoing discussion between Rick and his family for about the last 2 weeks, Vinny, as to whether or not they should go. And the decision was made that if Rick's advisement by the defense attorneys was to not participate in the pre-sentencing investigation report, and for good reason, that the family would stand with him in solidarity and not accept the verdict by refusing to show up. It is unfair to watch this family, or to ask this family to watch this man be sentenced for crimes he did not commit in a trial that has to be redone.
So, Erica.
Yes, in a trial that has to be redone because this trial is going to be retrialed, most likely. If not completely, he gets acquitted. That's my prediction.
Tell me, why do you believe he did not commit this horrific double murder?
Oh, well, Vinny, we only have, 20 minutes to talk about it tonight?
Not acquitted, exonerated. Excuse me, I said the wrong thing. He might get exonerated or he might get a new trial. Those are where I'm kind of heading with this once we get to that point in the appeal.
The Frank's memo. Frank's memo, which was not a concoction of the defense team. It was a highly and very thoroughly investigated extension of a report created by an FBI task force who developed that theory. And the man who authored that report died at the hands of an Odinist prison guard 5 days after he turned that report in.
Wait.
Talking about Greg Ferenczi. We've gone over his homicide on my channel. And in my earlier research, I was not able to find a connection to the perpetrator who took Greg Ferenczi's life. If you remember, he was an FBI task force agent. He was an officer, I want to say with Terre Haute, Indiana police. So, or something like that. Somewhere he was something in that field anyways. So he was at his place of work, his office, and somebody threw a Molotov cocktail. It exploded outside of his window. He went outside to go check on what was going on, and he was shot in the head and he lost his life. I believe others came out, but were not injured, and I think they came out probably too late, and no one was able to. Well, they did catch the guy, and he's doing time for it. And they're going to talk about this, so I won't get into it. But it's just very interesting. But anyway, so at the time that I covered this case, I didn't have any information to tie the perpetrator to Odinism. But you're going to hear right now that he was an Odinist. Let me go backtrack a little bit.
A highly and very thoroughly investigated extension of a report created by an FBI task force who developed that theory. And the man who authored that report died at the hands of an Odinist prison guard 5 days after he turned that report in.
Wait.
He was one of the prison guards that was, in fact, an Odinist.
Wait. Say that again?
I'll just have to tell you, Vinny. Bob, back me on this. Am I lying?
No, she's talking about Greg Ferenczi, who was one of the three authors of the Odin report that Ferenczi
Ferenczi and Murphy wrote the report, and Ferenczi is no longer with us. Click had some sort of uh some sort of run with the law, and now he has charges on him, so he can't testify. He was not able to testify at the trial. That was all this. They put some fake charges on Todd Click, a upstanding good officer, in order to keep him from testifying at trial, I think, to discredit his um, reliability, his character. This man is, an outstanding cop, and then here we are, like, smearing them and giving, I think he was planted. I think there was stuff planted on him or whatever it was. I don't even know what the full case is on Todd, but it's ridiculous. Anyways, here we go.
and Kevin Murphy all put together because they continued that line of investigation for years until Greg Ferenczi was killed, and that was in front of a federal building shortly after he turned in that document.
Explain this to how is he killed? So the man who was killed was working for the FBI or was part of the task force. Who exactly was he?
He was one of the three members of the task force tasked with investigating all of the tips related, and I mean all of the tips related to a particular group of individuals. And Greg authored the report. It was turned in, I believe, on May 2nd. And he, on May 7th, was sitting in an office inside the federal building in, I believe it was Indy or Terre Haute. And a Molotov cocktail was thrown through his office window. Greg vacated his office, ran outside in front of the federal building. And that is when he was shot in the head by a former prison guard who is very openly tied to Odinism.
There you have it. Greg Ferenczi probably lost his life because they're hiding or covering for this group of Odinists. And I talked about in my last video, the sentencing of Richard Allen, that I think there is a large group of Odinists running the town. They could be politicians, judges, perhaps, um, DAs, prosecutors, governors, mayors. They could be anybody. I think that there were some individuals. I'm not saying who. I don't know specifically, but there are some very shady individuals that could have been part of it, including officers.
So was that prison guard arrested and prosecuted for this?
Yes, and charged, convicted. Yes, sir, he was. And this is one of the many details about the Delphi case that the state does not want the world to know. They don't want the world to know that Todd Click has been charged with unrelated crimes, another member of that task force. They don't want to know about the number of people associated with this case who have died or been charged, myself included. They don't want the world
Wait, you've
to know
been
what's
charged with
happening in
something now?
Indiana. The blood. I got to be careful.
Right.
But the blood spatter expert who testified at the Delphi trial was at my home, alone inside my home, 2 days before he testified in the trial, and Bob can attest to that. There's so much y'all don't know, Vinny. There's so much. People are scared, and then to have Doug and Dick sit there today and disparage us for the work we've done and talk about the transparency that they claim occurred in a case where there was none, where the defense team wasn't even allowed to present a case. Let's go. I'm ready. I told you I was going to talk starting the day the gag order was lifted. Let's do this.
Bob, what are you? I'm trying to make some sense of all this. So it seems like there's a big backstory here to the whole Odinism angle. And I just want to clarify this, right? So
If people are hearing this for the first time, this is just completely insane, and you don't think this is happening in your country, your state, your town, wherever, but it could be anywhere. This deep-seated evil that lives inside the town. Like it's feeding off of the evil people that live there.
There's a task force that's part of law enforcement. And there's some members of this task force who had a different theory. They did not believe Richard Allen, or Richard Allen wasn't even on the radar yet for anyone, but they believed that the murder of these two girls was connected to some sort of Odinistic or Odinistic group ritual killing. And what you're telling me is that one member of that group who authored that report is no longer alive. Another one's been arrested for something.
Right before trial. Right before trial. Unrelated to the case, but
is he law enforcement or is she law enforcement? Like the people on this task force, were they law enforcement officers?
Oh yeah, these were all longtime cops. These were all decorated. I mean, just Google Greg Ferenczi. You'll see immediately this guy was highly respected. All of these cops were longtime cops. And that's kind of what we've been saying about, this concept of Doug Carter getting up there and casting shade on the defense for doing their job. Number one, let's just understand that it's their job, and everything that was in that Frank's memo that people on the Richard Allen is guilty. They created this whole narrative thing. The defense did side. I don't know if they just don't realize it. All of that came from the discovery tendered to the defense by the state. None of this was cooked up by the defense.
Right.
That exact report we're talking about was in the discovery. That report that we're talking about right now was in the discovery.
Yeah. So they keep saying that, um, uh, that the Frank's memo stuff is all fake and we're just, all conspiracy theorists. But no, it's not. It was actually a legitimate investigation by three legitimate officers in good standing, and one's no longer with us. One's been charged with some bogus crimes, and the other one I don't think had as much of an involvement in the investigation, so that's why he's not a worry, I guess. I don't know, but whatever. So here we are. Let's move on. That was something to take in, huh? All right, so let's go over Lieutenant Jerry Holman's interview with this is with the M Sheet podcast, so the M Word podcast. Um, I can't say that on YouTube because, well, I probably can say it now because it's late enough in the stream. If you say words they don't like, they get mad at you. All right, so the Delphi homicides first person, Lieutenant Jerry Holman, part one. So this was their first. This was the lead investigator who lied his butt off on the stand. And he went on the M Sheet podcast, who they were like the first ones to say, "Oh, we've got the leak of these uh, crime scene photos," and it was like really questionable as to how they got them and what whatever. But so, anyways, they had them. They said they deleted them, and the person that what was his name? Mitch Westerman or something. He was the one that stole them out of uh, Br- uh, Andrew Baldwin's office. Not Brad. It's Brad Rosie and Andrew Baldwin. Andrew Baldwin is the one that had like his conference room into a makeshift like work area where he had all of his stuff out, and that included photos and um Mitch Westerman, who was a friend of Baldwin's and also had consulted with him on various he was another lawyer, so lawyers talk to other lawyers about their cases. It's not um unheard of, and it's not violating client privilege, whatever, unless you say, well, my client told me this and we're going to do something, whatever, but they need to, or they can absolutely talk to other lawyers, get ideas, shoot some ideas around and strategies, strategize how they're going to work on their particular case. And so Mitch Westerman, who was this person that, Baldwin trusted and confided in when it came to cases. They consulted him lots of times for other cases in the past, so why not this one? But anyway, so the pictures were out in his conference room. Baldwin left Mitch Westerman alone in the conference room. Mitch Westerman supposedly took a couple pictures of the crime scene photos on his phone and therefore leaked them afterwards. And one of the people that he leaked them to was this Robert Fortson. Robert Fortson, I believe, is the one who leaked them to other like YouTube creators and things like that. And um it was either Holman. It was somebody from law enforcement came and, really laid down the law and tried to be really threatening with what he was saying. And that led Robert Fortson to therefore think that he did something wrong, even though he didn't. But he thought that he did something wrong and he thought that there might be some legal ramifications for it, and he took his life. I'm assuming that's what he thought, because of the way that the interview went with, I want to say it was Holman. Correct me, please, in the chat if I'm wrong, or in the comments of this video. Somebody went to Fortson that same night he took his life after he was told about, what he could be facing for sharing those photos, which I think is just ridiculous because whatever. That doesn't help. Okay, so let's get to this interview. Sorry it's so late now in the video, 40 minutes in already, but who cares? Well, let's get started. So his name is Kevin. It's a married couple, I believe. She's a therapist, licensed therapist or something. And I don't know what Kevin does. They do this podcast together called M Sheet, and I believe her name is pronounced Anya. It's really weird. And his name is Kevin. So Anya says, today we will be hearing directly from one of the lead investigators in the Delphi homicide case, Lieutenant Jerry Holeman of the Indiana State Police. He was on this investigation from the beginning and played a crucial role working with Unified Command to seek a resolution. By the way, we're reading a transcript because we don't want copyright strikes. There was another channel that Jerry Holman went on, and every channel that restreamed it with their commentary, which is free, fair use, by the way, you can do that. It's not a copyright strike. But she went around and tried to get everybody a copyright strike on their YouTube channels, whoever streamed this. So that is why somebody kind enough took the time to write out the transcript for this, for both of the interviews with the M podcast and with Hidden True Crime is the other channel that they did. All right, moving on. The members of Unified Command, if you remember, they had the Unified Command that was it was comprised of like head investigators of the top agencies. So they had ISP, Indiana State Police, who Jerry Holman works for. We had the Carroll County Sheriff's Department was also working on this case, and I want to say someone else. There might have even the FBI, the task force. So there were multiple agencies and people working on this case, and some of them, some of those lead people were in the Unified Command. And so the members of the Unified Command, it says, were tasked with solving the brutal homicides of 14-year-old Liberty German and 13-year-old Abigail Williams, two best friends who were abducted and their lives taken in Delphi, Indiana in 2017. So this case is older. Been some years before the family thinks that they got justice, although they didn't, but you and I know that. The family, I don't know, they must not have really paid attention at trial. All right, so Kevin, the co-host of the podcast, the M Sheet podcast. Unified Command was a team of investigators and personnel made up of individuals from the Indiana State Police, the Carroll County's Sheriff's Office, and the Carroll County Prosecutor's Office. So the DA, or no, not who is investigating in Carroll County's prosecutor? That would be Nick McClellan, right? Yeah, okay. I don't know why I confused myself there for a second. That's Nick McClellan and his team. I believe there's two others. Stacy Diener and something Luttrell. I can't think of his last name, or first name, but those are his two co-counsel. All right, so, and several volunteers who also worked on the case. So, Unified Command, ISP, Carroll County Sheriff's Office, and the DA's office. They ran down lead after lead for years, also volunteers, sorry, and until they found volunteer Kathy Shank, who found a crucial tip. Again, with the crucial tip, we don't know what the crucial tip was, but she found this crucial tip about Richard Allen, and the whole thing just broke wide open. That's what their narrative is at this time. All right, so Anya says after that, it fell to Lieutenant Holman and the others to investigate Allen. They did so, putting together the case that resulted in a successful conviction this past November. With the lifting of the gag order, Lieutenant Holman is now free to speak with us about the experience of investigating the case. Some background: Lieutenant Holman graduated from the 61st Indiana State Police Recruit Academy and has worked for the state police since 2001. He was promoted to become a detective in 2009. So he really wasn't a detective for very long. I mean, well, okay. He's got some years of experience, but he's not like a seasoned veteran or anything like that. All right. So Anya says this past year he was promoted to lieutenant. He has undergone trainings around narcotics operations, drug intelligence, informant development and management, undercover techniques, hostage negotiations, crisis interventions, assessing criminal behavior, and the Reed interview school. I have done, a, I think, a really good episode on the Reed technique on my channel. I will link it below. Hold on, let me write that down for myself. Sorry about that. Okay. So I've done a video about Reed technique, and it's basically a technique that has been used for decades by our law enforcement, and it is almost a surefire way to get a confession, whether the person is guilty or not. Because the whole idea of the Reed interview technique, is to get a confession. And it uses some rather deceptive and nefarious techniques to do so. You lie, you do whatever you can to psychologically mess this person up to get some kind of confession. Even and many people do confess falsely, wrongly, and we're seeing that now these days. People are starting to, because of this, people are starting to get away from the Reed technique, but most officers have not caught up with, you know, new ways of thinking and are still doing the Reed technique. And yeah, so look for the comments and I'll also post it separately on my X page so you guys can find the link to that. It's a video on the Reed technique. I go into, how it was formed and what it's all about. All right, so he also graduated from the Federal Bureau of Investigation's National Academy. In this interview, he will discuss the challenges of this investigation, the lead involving Keegan Kline, and Lieutenant Holman's own interactions with Allen. This will be the first of two episodes featuring Lieutenant Holman. Kevin says this marks the beginning of the first person interview series. We will seek to interview as many of the individuals. Okay, blah, blah, blah. I don't care. All right. So Anya says, my name is Anya Kane. I'm a journalist. Kevin says, I'm Kevin Greenlee. I'm an attorney. Oh, okay. So he's the attorney. I thought she was a therapist. Maybe not. Okay, I got that wrong. She's a journalist. He's an attorney. I don't listen, obviously. Um, sorry guys, but I don't. All right, so Anya says, and this is the M sheet. Kevin, I don't know how they can say that without like getting struck all the time. Kevin says, we're a true crime podcast focused on original reporting, interviews, and deep dives into homicide cases. We're the M sheet. And this is the Delphi homicides first person. Lieutenant, why are they calling him a first person? That's weird. They called him the first person twice. But this is Jerry Holman, the lead detective in the Delphi homicides. Kevin says, can you tell us a little bit about your background? Holman says, sure. Well, I grew up in the White County area. I lived in most of my teenage years in Reynolds, Indiana, and Monon. I graduated in 1989 from North White High School, which is located up in Monon. After that, I joined the Marine Corps. Shortly after that, probably in the fall of 1989, I went to the Marine Corps boot camp out in San Diego, California. After that, I did some more training in California and then went to Fort Sill, Oklahoma for field artillery training. I was a 8 in 11, whatever that means. Or an 0811. Kevin asks, what is an 0811? Jerry says field artillery cannoneer. So this guy is like a career Marine Corps guy. He's a career military person, and now he's found his way to become a lieutenant, a detective, and uses his military training and read technique training to strong arm people into confessions, apparently. All right, so he was a field artillery cannoneer. He says, so I've basically shot howitzers, loaded them, things like that. Cannons, basically, if people don't know what howitzers are. From there, I went to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, where I spent a majority of my time. I was first assigned to Fox Battery, 2nd Marine, 10th Division. In that time, I got married probably a year and a half after I joined the Marine Corps. My wife was 3 months pregnant when I went on my first deployment. It was supposed to be for 6 months. We were going to, we call them pumps, where we fly in Okinawa and we train over there. Spent very little time in Okinawa, went to the Philippines for a little bit, went back to Okinawa, and the day that we were supposed to fly home, we flew to Saudi Arabia. Do you see how he word salads a lot? And we're not even talking about the case yet. He's all over the place here. We flew to Saudi Arabia because that was in 1991, end of 90, beginning of 91, when the Gulf War, the ground war kicked off. So they needed more artillery support. So he is like a warmonger. He is like, this is his majority of his early life is in the Marine Corps, it seems, and blowing up stuff, basically. He's a cannoneer. He continues on. So we went over there, flew to Saudi Arabia, ended up moving up into Kuwait, and I believe just into Iraq. And that was during January, December, January, February of 9, end of 90, first of 91. After that, came home, stayed in North Carolina, and went on 2 Mediterranean floats. We call them med floats. You're on a U.S. vessel and you float around the Mediterranean. We go train with different countries like Turkey, Italy, Greece, Albania, Spain, just to name a few. I can't remember all of them, but I did 2 med floats. One was on the USS Gunston Hall. That was my first one, and the second one I was aboard the USS Sippin, and I I re-enlisted. So he continued his career, and then I was honorably discharged in 97. So he was in, when did he say he started in 89, right? Yeah, graduated in 89, and in the fall he went into the Marine boot camp. So from 89 to 97. That's a long time to be in the military. And then he comes out and he's a cop, and he gets to just use that military mentality on innocent people. I don't like it. I'm really having a problem with that. Like, I'm seeing him as, I just can see him like as a hard ass, if for lack of a better term, that he would want to be intimidating and use his, tough guy, use the tough guy routine. And because I've seen him in interviews and I kind of have seen how he acts, is like his mannerisms, I can see that about him, but it just seems that way to me. I don't know. Maybe it's because I've seen his mannerisms and whatnot. He seems like a hard ass to me. Anyways, moving on. So I wanted to get into law enforcement. Oh, wait, after that, I became a state trooper. I wanted to get into law enforcement. My father was in law enforcement. He was in a town marshal of Reynolds and also corrections officer at White County and ended up becoming the director of community corrections where they started that and when they first started that in White County. So I kind of had an idea after being in the Marine Corps and what my dad did. I wanted to get into law enforcement, but I didn't. I didn't really want to go city or county. I did apply for a few, but I really wanted to be a state trooper. Did anybody ask for his entire life story? I wonder. I mean, maybe they did, but this is crazy. Um, Okay, so I had some people retired, Lieutenant Jay Jank, Sergeant Kim Riley, some of those people that Al Strange, those are some troopers that I knew growing up that I knew growing up that my dad would hang around. And I always thought that's what I want to be. I want to be like those guys. But at the time I got out of the Marine Corps, you had to have 40 credit hours, and I didn't have any college at the time. So I went to work at Wabash National, which is a trailer factory in Lafayette. So he worked at a trailer factory in Lafayette. Um, because he didn't have the 40 credits needed to go into law enforcement. My father-in-law at the time was a supervisor over the used trailer department, and they would hire a bunch of people through the temporary services, and I went through the temporary service and I worked there for him for 6 months, and then I got hired on full-time at Wabash, went and worked in a line and ended up in metal fab. But I didn't enjoy it. I didn't feel like it was rewarding. I was doing the same thing, and just coming out of the Marine Corps where you're doing all kind of traveling and doing all kind of exciting things and serving your country, it was kind of a drop off. So then I really knew I wanted to get into law enforcement. So it was boring. Basically, you like that adrenaline, you like that tough guy uh veneer that you put on so that you can rough up your perpetrators, he likes that whole Marine Corps vibe. Now I lost my spot. Oh, and he says it was kind of a drop off, so he's bored doing an actual like normal job. Not that the Marines aren't a job. It's definitely a job. I'm not saying that. No offense, and it is something I would never ever want to do. But thank you to all of our troops. But yeah, so that's very different than that kind of lifestyle. It's very different, and then you get out and you are working in a factory or doing the same thing, the same repetitive things every day, and it gets very tiring. So this is basically the reason why he wanted to be a cop. It's boring doing anything else. He wants a fun job where he can go around and act tough. So then I really wanted to get into law enforcement. So I went back to Purdue for a little while. I kind of thought, well, if I don't want to be a police officer, maybe I'll be a school teacher. So I went for education. Oh, geez. Imagine him as a teacher. At first, I did a couple semesters at Purdue. It was extremely difficult because I was working the 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift and then not every day, but I would go substitute teach and from like 8 to 8:30 take a nap. Okay. And then I had night classes. I had two night classes. So I'd go to my night classes, which usually started or 7 or 8 and ended at 7 or 10, and then go right to work and try to get a nap in here or there. But at some point around 2000, I think it was the summer of 2000, I call him my neighbor, but we live out in the middle of nowhere. So Kim Riley lived about a mile and a half, about three cornfields over, and then my wife, where she grew up, they were neighbors. So my wife would babysit Kim Riley's kids when he was younger. What does any of this have to do with anything? Oh my God, he is a babbler. He just babbles. And he'd always stopped by or see me mowing the roadsides and ask if I was still interested in being a state trooper. And I said, yeah, I'm still working on it. I'm working full-time job, going back to school part-time. And he said that the state police was going to use if you had a certain amount of time in the military, you could use that in lieu of the 40 credit hours. That's horrifying that people can just bypass that 40 credit hour if they have military training. Anywho, and I said, "Well, if that happens, bring me an application. I'll apply right away." And he did one day, pulled out this was before internet and laptops and everything in 2000. There were laptops in 2000, weren't there? Oh, maybe not. This is like 20 years ago. Okay, maybe not 2000. So, kicking off he brought me a written application and I filled it out and started the process of like June, I believe June of 2000, and got hired with the state police in January of 2001 is when I started. So tell us a bit about your career with the state police. This is Anya speaking. Tell us a little bit about your career with the state police and how you sort of rose up the rankings with that. Jerry Holman continues. Sure, like I said, I was selected to go to the academy in January of 2001. I graduated in June of 2001. I was appointed to the Lafayette district as a road trooper. So everybody that comes through the state police, no matter where they are, starts as an enforcement or road trooper. And I did that for about 5 years. I worked White and Carroll counties. I worked mid shift and night shift. So mid shift would have back then would have been like 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. and then night shift would have been 10 p.m. or late shift would have been 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., 6:30 a.m. Why is he telling us all the shifts? Why do we care? Word salad. Jerry Holman. So I worked. He continues on. So I worked those shifts a lot. So I got a lot of experience with OWI investigations, drug investigations, things like that. And then in '04 or 5, I was sent to methamphetamine clandestine lab training, and I was able to identify meth labs and dismantle them. Maybe he should have stuck with that and not solving crimes then. Like, how did he get to crimes? How did he get to a detective at this point? Maybe you should have stuck with one thing. I don't know. All right, so he continues. And at that time, we had a part-time team, and I think sometime in '05 or '06, the law changed to where you had to sign for the student uh, pseudoephedrine? No, sufedrin, whatever that is. Um, that was when I know what that's talking about. When you had to show an ID for cold medicines and things like that back then, because they were being bought in bulk by people. Excuse me. I don't know. My voice keeps doing that. People were. Oh my God. Excuse me. Okay, that's better. Sorry. Don't know what happened there. The law changed and people had to show their ID when they bought cold medicine because people were buying them in bulk to make meth. And so that's what he's talking about. And if you bought too much, then that was a crime. It was like you were flagged in the system. But it also was a lead for us to find out who was manufacturing methamphetamine illegally in the communities. So in '06, I was a full-time meth suppression guy for the Lafayette Post. And I did it for about 3 years. Did a lot of training, a lot of investigative experience, interviews, following up on people that basically were buying pseudoephedrine. Yeah, they spelled it wrong here. It is pseudoephedrine for people to make meth. And so I worked with hand in hand with the drug enforcement section. And like I said, I did that till 2009. I really enjoyed that job. It was just nobody wanted to deal drugs or make meth, 9 to 5. So it was always inconvenient, 2 in the morning or on your birthday or your wedding anniversaries or Christmas. And so after 3 years of doing that, I just kind of thought my services would be better and better enjoyed regular investigation. So I put in for promotion to district detective, is what we call them, and I got the promotion in 2009. So I was a district detective. District detectives work a little bit of everything, child SA or CA cases, bank robberies, homicides, officer involved shootings, financial crimes, and internet crimes. So I did that for about 5 years. And then in 2014, I was promoted to sergeant and was assigned as the investigative squad leader. The investigative squad leader does a lot of the day-to-day supervision of the detectives. And back then, I think we had between 4 and 6 detectives at the time. And you're just responsible for reviewing the reports, making sure that they have the training and resources available to do their job. And as a sergeant, you still worked a lot of cases with them as well. And I only did that for 2 years. And then got promoted to the district investigative commander, the rank of first sergeant. And the first sergeant basically oversees the sergeant, but what? The first sergeant oversees the sergeant, but he also oversees all other investigations that even troopers do. So you have the ISL that you're responsible for. You work with the road sergeants and their troopers to make sure that they're doing the reports correctly and a timely manner, and getting to the prosecutor for the review, and also making sure they have any resources they need to do a thorough investigation. And I did that from 2016 to 2024, where in March of 2024, I was promoted to the rank of lieutenant and I was the Area 1 investigative commander. The Area 1 investigative commander covers Area 1, which is the Peru post, the Lafayette post, and the Lowell post. And basically, I supervise the district investigative commanders and make sure, same thing you do as a district investigator commander, but just have a bigger area and just make sure that they have the resources, training, and other logistics such as travel. If you're going to travel out of state, you organize that. So he's a secretary. He has more work as, I mean, no offense to secretaries. We all need admins. I've been in administrative roles. my whole life, but he's an admin. He's not a detective. He's an admin. He does all the um uh like the HR type stuff for the people that he is responsible for. Anyways, all right, so Jerry Holman continues on saying, just make sure that they have the tools necessary to be able to do their job, and that's what I've been doing since March of 2024. Kevin says, let's go back a minute to 2017. Of course, in February of that year, Liberty German and Abigail Williams their lives were taken, and you became involved in that investigation. How did you or how did you happen to become involved in this case? Jerry Holdman continues. I was in charge of all district investigations. I actually was on my way to work at an office at the Lafayette Post, and I heard on the radio that there was a uh, uh, two missing girls in Delphi. So I immediately that's like a was that a slip? Like there was a missing girl, so he first heard there about one girl and then another. I don't know, maybe. So I immediately called Sheriff Lesenby at the time and asked him what was going on, and he basically said that two young females went missing. They were supposed to be on a trail and picked up on the 13th, and I think he said that pretty much had a bunch of volunteers over there and didn't really need any assistance at that time. That was probably 8 in the morning on my way to the post. So he's on the way to the Lafayette post, wherever that is, somewhere in Lafayette, I'm sure. But we have no idea where that is really in relation to the crime scene or where Jerry Holman is to begin with. So that was probably 8 in the morning on my way to the post. Later, I was contacted by a retired captain, Dave Kirkham. He was the area captain and he asked me if I knew what was going on. I said, "Yeah, I heard there was two girls missing in Delphi." I reached out to the sheriff at this time. At this time, he said he had enough help. He said, "Well, they're requesting a helicopter, so we need boots on the ground, so to speak. We need you to go over there and give us some feedback. What's going on?" So they just want him to go over there to give feedback, not anything else. This is so stupid. So I went over there. I was familiar with Sheriff Lesenby, worked with some cases, worked with him when he worked the road. Same thing with Tony Liggett. I knew of Tony and Kevin Hammond. So I saw all three of them. I met with them and we discussed what was going on. They had a large amount of people there volunteering. So Sheriff Liggett Well, Lesenby, Tobe Lesenby was the sheriff at the time. Liggett is the current sheriff now. And this Kevin Hammond, all Carroll County Sheriff Department. So, and your Jerry Holman is ISP, so that's why he's saying what he's saying. All right, I'll just give you a little context. And I had nothing to do with that. They were organizing, having people sign in and things like that. So I probably got there between 11:30, shortly after that, around 12 p.m. So which is it, 11:30 or 12? We were notified that the two girls were located in the woods near the Monon High Bridge. So I went. Actually, my car, I was blocked in. So I rode out with the FBI agent at the time named Rich Davies, and he went to to the scene. There was already some police officers there, not very many, but I went down to the bottom of the hill and later Sergeant Buckley, he was took over as the ISL for me when I got promoted to DIC. So investigative lead or something, I don't know what ISL means. Um, and him and I met with, at some point, we met with Tony Liggett and Kevin Hammond, and we were asking, do you want to work? Do you want to work? That's a weird question. Do you want to be the lead in this? Or do you want us to be the lead in it? And things like that. So we worked out the logistics of that and got some crime scene tape up and started with the investigation there. So hold up. If you've got multiple entities or jurisdictions or whatever trying to, investigate a case, you got the county and you got the state police. Isn't there like a normal protocol, like state police takes precedence, or if situation is this person takes precedent or takes over the case? You know what I mean? I don't understand why they don't already know who should be the lead here. Why are they even having this conversation? Shouldn't that already be like, oh, duh, yeah, you're the lead because you're always the lead or whatever? All right, so Anya says, can you tell us a little bit about how brutal this crime was against these two young girls? Jerry Holman says, yeah, I would say it's very brutal. Two young girls had their throats slit. Abby one time, Libby, depending on how you look at least 3 or 4 times, but several times. And then they were just treated like animals. So the um, the girls, they're saying, were treated like animals. They were left in the woods with sticks on them. Libby was completely naked. Abby was naked at some point or had some of her clothes off. She had some of Liberty's clothes on. And like I said, Richard Allen, treated those two like animals. He's going to use this analogy, I guess, a lot, even though I treat my animals really well. They're quite spoiled. So treating an animal or treating someone like an animal, I don't know. To me, I don't know. Wouldn't you say like Richard was an animal? Like Richard is the animal for doing the supposed crime that you say he did? This guy doesn't really write for a living. All right. So you don't treat humans like that. He embarrassed them. He controlled them with a gun, So it was brutal. I think with my background as a Marine, I've become compartmentalized a little bit, and scenes like that don't really bother me as much. So I wasn't like, oh my God. I was more like angry that someone would treat two human beings, two innocent young girls like that. I'll never be able to understand how somebody could treat two people like that. Okay. He goes on. So I was more angry about that than in all of the brutal, horrific crime that it was, just because I became a little bit callous to it with 8 years in the Marine Corps. And at that time, 15 to 20 years as a state trooper, uh, you just fortunately get used to that. So 8 years in the Marine Corps. As you can see, he has kind of an attitude like, I'm angry about it. I just got angry. So, and his whole military, like, well, it doesn't bother me because I was in the military. So, what does that mean? Like, did you take people's lives? Is that why you're so easily able to frame an innocent man and send him to prison for life? I think the only person being callous here are the people that actually were supposed to be doing the investigations and didn't, or covered for the actual perpetrators. All right, Anya says, so you mentioned that, from the get go, you guys were working this with the Carroll County Sheriff's Office, and there were other agencies involved as well. And I'm just wondering, you worked it for so many years. What was working in the beginning like, and how did that change over time? Sort, what did the workflow look like for you? He says, right. I think, like I said, we established early on that it was going to be the county's case. Initially, ISP agreed to assist with the FBI. So the FBI is involved already. like already on this early on the FBI is involved, or this was later. But he says initially ISP agreed to assist with the FBI. Steve Mullins was the chief of Delphi, and a and I remember standing at the bottom of the hill talking to Kevin and Tony and asking them, like I said earlier, do you guys want to be the lead on this or do you want us to? And I can't remember which one, but one of them said, you guys should probably take it. And the other one's like, well, let's talk to the sheriff. Sheriff came come down and said, hey, I think you're going to take it, but will you support us and give us, I think we're going to take it, but will you support us and give us all the resources that we need that the state police have so that we don't have? And I said, absolutely. I said, we're not going to leave you hanging on this. We're going to be in this with you from day one until the end. Yikes. So we did. Whoa, hold on. Sorry, my dog sneezed and scared himself, I think, and made a bunch of noise. So I didn't want that to hurt your ears. All right. He says, so we did, and initially, like I said, it was a small group, but within days, every surrounding county, seems like every county, every agency wanted to help. I mean, it just hit the media, it hit social media, and everybody wanted, they had good intentions and they wanted to help and they did help. And it just became a managerial nightmare at times because you don't, as a state trooper, yeah, I have authority over them, but I don't have authority over the county or the FBI or, so when you ask for reports or you ask somebody to do something, you don't know their strengths and weaknesses. Okay, but that does, okay. Yeah, you guys tell me what you're thinking about this. This is weird and bizarre and odd. And I'll say odd again because the um in the interview that he does with the Hidden True Crime channel, he uses the word odd, I don't know, probably like 50 times, basically trying to describe Richard Allen's interview or interrogation rather, and what was so odd about him. Like, well, I thought this was odd, and this was odd, and this was odd. Like everything was odd to him, rather than, there might be other explanations as to the things that you're noticing or seeing or whatever. Or Rick Allen's in sweats. He came to Sweats to pick up his car, and you thought that was odd? Like, those are the things that he was finding odd about Richard Allen for no reason at all. Like, okay, he wore sweatpants out in public. Oh no, let's arrest him for 130 years. I mean, really? That's pretty much where he was going with us. But anyways, all right. So where was I? So the other agencies had to start pulling back the resources that they were given, including the FBI. And the FBI had some turnover rate where I know Mike Paisley was transferred. Rich Davies had retired. We got a few other people in and out of there. But they had other things to do as well. But anytime we'd ask them, anytime we asked the FBI, we were able to get assistance if needed. What? What was any of that? Gobbledygook. Hiding something there. Word salad. And I can still call those guys today. And I just had Mike Peasley call me a couple weeks ago asking for a couple troopers to help the FBI serve a search warrant. And so, what does that have to do with anything? What does that have to do with Richard Allen? And we did so, and then Rich Davies ended up coming back after he retired as a special deputy to assist with the investigation. So we still have good rapport with most of the agencies that we worked with, including the FBI. I know there's some misconceptions there, but everybody wanted to help and we wanted everybody's help, but it was just turned into a little bit more than what we anticipated. What unique challenges did you guys face in this case? Well, I think when people think about this case, you don't realize how far out in the middle of nowhere it occurred. So we only had one video camera that was catching a little bit of traffic on the road near the scene. There's a very little evidence, and I think that people get caught up with that. He just admitted there's very little evidence. Yes, there is very little evidence. And there's very little evidence that even ties Richard Allen to the scene, if any. I say there's none. Um, Other than he was there and he admits to being there at the times that he said he was there. But there's no evidence of him being at the scene of the crime. Anyways, so there are many crimes where you don't have DNA or you have insufficient amount of DNA, but it's not common, but it is a challenge when you don't have the evidence. And it became a very high profile case amongst the media nationwide. Yeah, I'm sure you guys weren't betting on it becoming a very high profile case because if you were, you wouldn't have fudged the investigation so badly. Continuing on, he says, I mean, we were getting calls from everywhere, media outlets from Chicago, California, talk shows. So that's one of the things where it became challenging because you're trying to manage this, and all the agencies involved made it a somewhat challenging as well. And not to mention that we had to move our command center 3 or 4 times. We started just above the Delphi Police Department, moved to a better facility where RMC building, the old RMC building, which was nice of them to let us use. Then we moved back to the Delphi building and then we moved to another location, and that was a challenge. And just having a lot of people wanting to help. Well, what does that have to do with the case? All of this is nothing about the investigation whatsoever. His challenge in this was basically he organized people and the moving of their office when it needed to get moved. And he's um, not talking about the investigation. More of his complaints are about the struggles that he had to endure while he was a cop, basically doing cop work. And just having a lot of people wanting to help. So, we mentioned it. We talked about all of this amongst us is you had a lot of people with good intentions, but you can't have an electrician do a plumber's job. So they didn't want outsiders coming in. So that got a little bit chaotic there. I always say, it started out as chaos. We got it to be controlled chaos. And then as soon as we could, it was more manageable chaos. It was still chaotic, but we were able to manage it. The other thing that was challenging was the enormous number of tips and leads. We had well over 14,000 emails, calls, and our job was to leave no stones unturned, I think is what they're supposed to say. And we didn't. So we would not only address those tips as they came in, but go back over and review it, have our other agencies do a peer review, and by doing that, we cleared a lot of people. Oh, but wait, we were just told that they don't use the word cleared in that court TV press conference thing. Somebody asked that, the court TV, Barbara McDonald asked that, and Nick McClellan said, we're not going to use the word cleared, but we don't have anything that ties those individuals to the case. So there you have it. Jerry Holman says they cleared people. So somebody's lying. And it's probably not Jerry Holman in this particular instance, even though he is a big fat liar. He continues on and says, we also made a lot of unrelated arrests too, so that was helpful. How is that helpful to us in this interview? Um, Kevin says, how did the tips lead to arrests in unrelated cases? Jerry Holman says, I always said that the public has an eye for bad people. This person's bad doesn't necessarily make him be the child KILLer or whatever, but we did help clear a cold case, a homicide, and we had a tip on a guy from the Peru area. We passed that information on over to Peru District. Bob Burgess took it, and they were able to make an arrest from that. Just going to people's houses. We would stumble upon meth labs, people wanted on warrants, people doing things they shouldn't be doing at the time when we went to interview them. Well, that's interesting. So they used this case to lock up more people somehow. So those kinds of some examples of how we made some arrests. Kevin asks, some of the tips were obviously helpful, even in ways they may not have been intended to be. Were all of the tips helpful? He laughs. Not all of them. We did get a lot of unorthodox tips, and some tips just didn't have enough information. We'd get a call saying, looks like the guy, sounds like the guy, but then wouldn't tell us where or who, or, he's at Walmart. Well, that Walmart, we didn't know if it was the state of Indiana or North Carolina. So those were not even helpful. We would get some, just like I said, off of the wall type tips about the Sasquatches living under the bridge. We should interview the Sasquatches and Potawatomi Indians that live out there. They observed this crime, so you need to interview them. Just things like that just weren't helpful. And then we got a lot of what I would refer to as investigative suggestions like you should do this, you should do that, and a lot of them we'd already done. I can't remember anybody giving us a suggestion and we didn't think of. Like some of them were good, like check all the sex offender registries lists in the area, check all the cameras around the crime scene, interview everybody that lives out there, things like that. We'd already done multiple things, but some of them were just a little bit crazy, like we should polygraph the guy on the bridge. Well, that's great, but if you don't have the guy on the bridge, and who is the guy on the bridge? I don't know. We don't even know that that's Richard Allen on the bridge. That is supposed bridge guy. Continuing on, he says, well, we'll use sodium pentothal, laugh on the guy on the bridge to make him tell the truth. So, like truth serum. And just some things like that. That's totally like military type shit. You're gonna give him truth serum to get information, Jerry? Mm. Ay, ay, ay. And we definitely you take the good with the bad, but we appreciated how much the public wanted to help. It was just not locally, but nationwide, and we were getting tips all over, and it was duly noted and very appreciated. Anya says, you mentioned a bridge guy, and I'm wondering, can you speak a bit about the video found on Libby's phone and how integral that ended up being to the case? We were really confident that that guy on the bridge was the one person that took the girls or lives or had significant involvement in it. And our main focus the whole time was trying to locate that person. So it was very important to us to identify him, and unfortunately it took us a long time to do that, but we did. Okay, but you had his name from the very beginning because Richard Allen, 3 days after the girls went missing, he went in or he called the tip line, I think, or something. He went in and gave his statement eventually. All right, so he says we were confident it was the bridge guy. Our main focus the whole time was to locate that person. Kevin asks, um, one thing I always wondered about was a couple of years into the case, there was this press conference where it was announced that a new direction was being taken. What was that about and what inspired it? Yeah, a new direction was being taken. They decided, well, we're not going to find the actual guy, or we're not going to pin it on the guys that actually did it because we're covering for them for some reason. So let's find our patsy. And that they did. That, I bet, was the break in the case, the twist in the case. So, what inspired this new direction? Jerry Holman says, well, like I said earlier, we had a lot of different agencies reviewing the case and we had people giving their input, and we were at the point where we weren't really getting any new information. So, we wanted to try a different approach. And some of the suggestions were to reach or to speak directly to the KILLer and tell him that we thought he was hiding in plain sight and trying to generate better tips. I think a couple times during press conferences, we put a poster board up saying this is what we need for a tip. And I don't remember exactly what it is, but give us more information that just sounds like my cousin looks like my cousin, where's your cousin live? What? Okay, Jerry Holman. Is he tied to Delphi? Do you know? Do you know? And we understand that some people don't know all that information, but we were just requesting more information to do. And then also we went did the new sketch, and I always thought it was the same person, but because different witnesses saw Richard Allen from different angles and different locations, different lighting, the sketches were different. No. That's not why he looked different, or the sketches look different. The sketches look different because they're two different people, and there were eyewitnesses describing the two different people, but yet here Jerry Holman is trying to say that it's always been the same person. He's always thought it was the same person because he has to say that because they didn't arrest anybody else besides Richard Allen. Continuing on. So we thought putting out this new sketch may give someone the same perception that the witness had that day. So we thought that might help. And I always thought it was just a younger version. If an older person sees someone a little younger, they're going to describe him as a lot younger. What? Okay. If you say so. If an old person sees a young person, they're going to describe him as a lot younger. If a younger person sees somebody that's older than them, they may perceive him as older. I'm not a fan of sketches. I know that they're not always reliable, and witness statements sometimes get a little messy. And just because people aren't trained to be witnesses, they're out there. They don't know a crime's about to occur or a crime just occurred. They're just out there enjoying their day. So when it comes down to seeing that, kind of like, a bank robbery, you got four tellers. You're going to get four different descriptions. But once they see that still photo from the surveillance video, they're going to be like, yep, that's the guy. Sketches are completely different. I'm sorry, you cannot gaslight me one more second and tell me it's the same person. I am not falling for it, and I won't. And they get angry at themselves for giving sometimes a poor description of that. So I think with that, that's common with witnesses. But again, we weren't going to leave any stone unturned. We're going to try every avenue of approach to this, and try to find out who did it. He is a bad speaker. He's repetitive a lot, so I'm trying to cut it out, but it's hard to read through, so I apologize. And at the end of the day, we were focused on that photo that Libby provided off her off our video. That was who we were saying, the superintendent said multiple times, don't focus on the sketches, focus on the video. The clothing, the anything that's the guy we want to talk to. So that was kind of the gist of the new direction. That doesn't really tell us much. Don't focus on the sketches, focus on the video, the clothing. That was the new direction. What? You see how his answers just don't make sense? He and like where was it? Um that like he stutters. I'm wondering, I'm beginning to wonder. I stutter too, but I'm beginning to wonder if like some of the stuttering is because he's lying and he's having a hard time coming up with the words. So Anya says, you mentioned that you wanted to kind of confront this guy or speak directly to him through that press conference. Behind the scenes, what sort of things were you guys as investigators talking about when you were or when you were thinking about, what kind of person did this in terms of characteristics that he might have? Holman answers, sure. I think through our investigation and some of the outside peer reviews, we thought it was somebody that was a power assertive or a control person, which would not describe Richard Allen, by the way. So some of the BAU and some of these other agencies that kind of reviewed it said that it was more likely was someone with limited or no criminal history. Some people say, no, you don't do that with no criminal history. You don't just go right up to taking two girls' lives in some kind of ritualistic ceremony for your first crime. That's not going to happen. But it was somebody that had that controlling demeanor of them that wanted to be in control. So that's kind of what we were thinking at the time of this press conference. We did not have any indication of any evidence leading us to believe that it was Richard Allen. Not at that time, we just didn't. So we were just kind of working off of what the behavioral analysis units were telling us from the FBI. Can't remember if the U.S. Marshals were involved at that time yet or not. But the BAU did analysis on the information, and then we had another group from the Sherry Black Foundation, a couple former psychiatrists and a former Pennsylvania state trooper that gave us an analysis. So we were going off of all that information and trying to figure out what type of person, and that's what we came out with is it was a power assertive control freak, probably someone who had as fantasies about essaying two young girls as well. Kevin says, I'm sure throughout this entire investigation there were times when names came up and they were looked at and then maybe dismissed or and the public didn't even know about it. But one name that the public did find out about was Keegan Klein, sorry. Can you talk a little bit about him? He says, "Sure, I can't remember exactly how we got the tip, but I know it came through our ICAC, Indiana Crimes Against Children. They started working that case as somebody who was a child predator and was soliciting young girls to meet them and get pictures. And at some point, we found out that he was communicating with Libby and some of her friends. What we learned about Keegan is he was a pathological liar. He was using a fake persona named Anthony Schatz to lure these girls in, and we investigated him thoroughly. We spent countless hours, manpower, and resources on him, and at the end of the day, we just were not able to establish probable cause in this case. Do I think he was communicating with the girls and that may be one of the reasons why they showed up on the bridge? Absolutely. But that doesn't mean that he's responsible for taking their lives. So he's admitting that he could have been meeting up with them on the bridge, but it's completely unrelated. And maybe that is true, but that doesn't make a whole lot of sense in my brain that this person who is trying to meet and solicit children online was communicating with Libby that very same day. So it's just, it baffles me that they don't think that there might be a connection. We've exhausted every investigative technique we could and just couldn't establish that probable cause that he's involved. Probable cause is not a high bar, really. They could have easily found some probable cause to get a search warrant for something, but they didn't. Doesn't that mean something to you? They couldn't find probable cause. And I think he kind of, to get jailhouse cred or whatever, took his opportunity and tried to get his 15 minutes of fame by doing some interviews and saying some things that weren't necessarily true. But that's my take on Keegan Kline. I think other people might have a different perception of that. Anya says, so things like the red Jeep that he traveled to the crime scene in, that you guys were not able to find on any footage, like you have to go where the evidence is. That's a question? He says, right. And we did find the red Jeep and we had it for a while and tested it and didn't find any evidence indicating that was used. But yeah, the red Jeep was not on Hoosier Harvest store video, which the indication was he would have driven that right past. Well, no, not necessarily. If he knows back roads and knows other ways and knows how to do things. If he's a local, he could have gotten there another way. Aren't there those back roads that um what's his face was on that said he saw the white van? Can't remember his name now from trial. Um anyways. So yeah, but yeah, the red Jeep was not on the Hoosier Harvest store video, which the indication was he would have drove right past it. We went and picked him we went and picked him up from the jail and said, "Hey, how'd you get there?" And he took us right past Hoosier Harvest store, and there was no red Jeep on that video. So, okay, so defendants who are caught never lie. So we could prove a lot of his lies, and we could prove that he was communicating with the girls, and he could definitely prove that he lied to us multiple times in the investigation. And I don't know why. My best assumption is he was trying to get street cred, which is stupid because that's not so way. That's not the way to do it. I don't know what he's saying there. Okay. Kevin says or asks, but of course, one of the key moments in the investigation involves a discovery made by Kathy Shank. Can you tell us about that? And this is the tip that Kathy Shank just happened to find one day randomly. She looked at the file and it just popped right out at her. And they were like, oh my God, that's it. He's the one. And now we're going to arrest him. But nobody gets to know what that tip is. Okay. So Jerry Holman says, well, first of all, Kathy's amazing. She has a heart of gold, retired for years, and came back to volunteer to help with the investigation. And we had a few retired people do that, but not at the level she was. I mean, she first started out at the front desk when I first remember her being involved was after we moved to the RMC building. She would be down at the front desk. Anybody come in with a tip or lead, she'd write it down, come and get a detective. Just amazing what she did. And she was there a lot. And then, she was thinking to help even more. So Steve Mullen knew her very well, worked with her when she was with the DCS or CPS, whatever was called back then, but Department of Child Services. So we knew her. He trusted her. We all trusted in her. And when she started organizing the filing cabinets, it made the investigation a lot better because we were getting a lot of multiple tips on multiple tips on one person. And what we were finding out that Orion, I don't know how you say that, wouldn't put it together. So whatever software they were using or something. So if you got a tip on Kevin Greenlee and then Kevin Jerry Greenlee or Jerry Kevin Greenlee, it wouldn't put that together. So we were giving these tips out and investigators were going out and they're like, "Yeah, I interviewed him." He said he's already been interviewed 4 times. So once we got the interviews and hard copies and put them together in a folder, if you got a tip on a guy, if you got a tip on Jerry Holeman, you would know, you would go to the H's in the filing cabinet, look and be like, okay, yeah, he'd already been talked to, and is there any is there anything in the tip they couldn't do like some kind of online version of this, like a shared Google file? Got to put it in okay, whatever. I guess they work harder, not smarter at the police station. Is there any in this is there any in this tip that's new that we need to talk to him about now? Anything in the tip? Or is it the same tip or same information? Is there new information? Then yeah, we would go interview him multiple times if we needed to. This would be so much easier done on some kind of nice filing spreadsheet with tabs and worksheets and things for each tip or each person, but whatever. And then later, in the investigation, she was going through and making sure that Orion was matched up with the filing cabinet information. And she would always bring tips to investigators saying, "Hey, I don't see a report on this." And we're like, we're pretty sure it was done. And we'd contact the investigator and maybe he didn't have his report done quite yet, and we would get the reports, or maybe they didn't remember, and we'd go back out and redo the follow up on the tip. So that was common for her to do. And then, the day in late, I believe, September, she took the tip of Richard Allen Whiteman and found that. And that was a true blessing and definitely got us in the right direction. So she took the tip on Richard Allen Whiteman. And ironically, it happened on her deceased husband's birthday. So that's why I believe that was a true blessing from powers a lot higher than us. And then we when we got to the tip, we worked it like any other tip like we would get, and we just thoroughly and investigated and exhausted every resource and manpower that we could do to either eliminate him as a suspect or establish probable cause. That's what we do with everybody. That's not really a specific answer. That's a very generalized, word salad-y answer to say, well, we did everything we could, and then we tried to rule him out or rule him in, and that's what we did. We got the tip. We'd either eliminate you or we'd establish probable cause, and the only time we were able to establish probable cause was on Richard Allen. So thank God for Kathy. She's an amazing lady. She's also going to have a special place in my heart and many, many others. She's awesome. Anya says, so you yourself had a number of interactions with Richard Allen after he came on the radar and this lead really started running. Can you tell us a bit about that and what he was like? So now, okay, let's backtrack just a second. So this Kathy Shank tip that they still haven't given us the tip that led to Richard Allen. What is the exact tip? It was just something she saw in a file and she told them about it and they investigated it and it didn't exclude him. It created probable cause. And they couldn't create probable cause. He said the only time we were able to establish probable cause was on Richard Allen. Again, I want to say probable cause is very minimal, like the bar is very low to reach probable cause, and they could have reached probable cause on any single one of the people in the Frank's memorandum. They also, let's not forget, there was a search warrant that was done in Ron Logan's property in his home. I believe the FBI may have even been more involved in it, and it didn't, for whatever reason, didn't lead to anything. I don't know. But I still suspect Ron Logan might have had something to do with it. Ron Logan has passed away since then, so we'll never get justice if Ron Logan did have something to do with it. All right, moving on from Kathy Shank, whatever. I think that whole thing was just a lie. They made that crap up. I don't even know if she helps them, or if she did, they picked someone random on their team to just say, hey, she's going to be the person that found the tip. She's going to be the grand prize reward winner because there was a reward money that was being given to her because she found the tip that put Alan away. It's like a couple $100,000, but she's going to donate it to the softball field for Abby and Libby, which that's also suspicious. Don't you guys think this is a little suspicious? Everything about the whole Kathy Shank story is suspicious. All right. So let's get into his interactions with Alan. So, and then maybe it'll wrap up here. We're getting closer to the end. All right. So he says, yeah, I mean, my interactions were brief. So as a supervisor, you don't get to do all the fun stuff sometimes. So during the search warrant, I was there just to make sure that we did everything as best as we could and didn't tear anything up. That's kind of when you do a search warrant, you don't want to be responsible for having to financially replace any property that was unduly destroyed. So when I first got to the Allen residence, I saw Richard and Kathy sitting in a vehicle. I think it was like a van, and I went over and they got out and walked over towards the CSI, and Richard Allen kind of followed me over, and I said, "We have a search warrant for your house." Jerry Holman says, our intentions are not to tear up anything. And if we do, there's a process, and I'll give you the tort claim and you can file for any damages. And I remember him making a comment, it doesn't matter, it's over. I did the walkthrough. So that's his comment that makes him like seem that he's guilty or something. But in Richard Allen's mind, it doesn't matter. It's over. You've already done the search. You've already, you ruined my reputation. All my neighbors are going to know that you're here and doing this. So it doesn't matter. It's over anyways. Is a perfectly reasonable thing for an innocent person to say. Moving on. I did the walkthrough. I went back over to him again and said something similar like, hey, I didn't see anything. I don't think we're going to tear anything up. If we have a locked container or locked cabinet or something like that and you have the key, would you be willing to let us open it? He said, yeah, but again, it doesn't matter. It's over. So they started the search. I, again, the old guy supervisor, would get to set out back and not do the real police work. So he had to sit in back and not do the real police work. He just basically said he's not a real cop. He's not. He is an administrative paperwork pusher. He's not a real cop. He sits back and lets the other people do the police work. He's not a real detective. So why is he the lead detective of this case? Okay, moving on. Sorry, I'm getting a little worked up here. But I'm loving the fact that Jerry Holman is on his press tour and giving himself away. It's great. Jerry Holman continues and says, at the time I was setting out in my car, and Richard Allen was with his wife in the van. And at some point, he came over and asked if he could sit with me because Kathy had to use the restroom. And I said, yeah, that's no problem. So he sat in there with me. We didn't really talk much at all. He would get out and smoke cigarettes quite a bit. After, I want to say 15 to 20 minutes, he asked me, did you guys detain my wife or arrest my wife? And I said, no, why would we? And he was like, well, I don't know, but she's been gone a long time. And I said, well, I can take you over to her place of employment if you want. And he said, nah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's over. And he said that at least 3 or 4 times to me. Well, maybe he thinks his life as he knows it is over because his neighbors are going to think things, places of employment are going to think things. So you guys have already done part of the damage just by showing up and searching his house with what probable cause? Because you found a bullet casing that you think looks like it came from a gun that was Richard Allen's, but not really, because at this time they don't even have that. So, what is your reasoning as to searching his home? You got none. All right, so Jerry Holman continues. And shortly after that, we were about done with the search. So maybe he's saying it doesn't matter, the search is over. It doesn't matter, the search is over because they're almost done with the search. God, Jerry Holman is an idiot. Kathy came back with one of her friends and she was crying, and Richard was trying to console her. And I said, hey, we're done. You want to walk through with me real quick? And I said, already walked through. I don't see any damages, but if there are, and we can take care of them again. And he said, no, it's over. It's over. Don't worry about it. It's already over. So again, he keeps like repeating this line as if it means something, but it doesn't. The damage is done. Something like that. So that was my first interaction with him. The second was when I interviewed him at the state police post. His demeanor was kind of odd to me. So his demeanor was odd to Jerry Holman. Well, I think everything about Jerry Holman's comments are odd. So his demeanor was kind of odd to me because we told him that he was coming to get his property, some of his property back. He was coming to get his car. When I went out to the lobby to get him, he handed his coat and emptied his pockets and gave his wife all of his belongings, which unless you think you're going to jail, you usually don't do that. What? Maybe he didn't want things falling out of his pockets and he wanted his wife to hold his stuff while he went to go get his car from you guys? I mean, it's really not unheard of. Women carry men's stuff all the time for them. It's not a problem, women and their purses and whatnot. Or spouses holding something of their other spouse while they go do something else. It's not unheard of. But to Jerry Holman, it's odd. So, unless you're going to jail, unless you think you're going to jail, you wouldn't do that. I've had people where in the interview I said, hey, I know what's going to happen. I'm going to forward this report to the prosecutor. If the prosecutor decides to file charges and I get a warrant, will you want me to call you and you turn yourself in? Absolutely. And they could cooperate and they would show up just like that. Sweatpants, t-shirt, no articles, because I think the average person knows that you don't want to bring things to jail with you because they're probably going to get lost or thrown away, and you can't bring your own things to jail. You have to get the items you need while you're in jail. So that was a little weird to me. So again, weird to him that he did that he wore sweatpants to pick up his car from the police station. That's odd that he wore sweatpants. whatever. Just talking to him early on, he seemed to be coherent. He seemed to be a little bit agitated, but not at first, you know. Well, yeah, he got agitated the more and more you started accusing him of a crime he didn't commit. That's when he got agitated. At first, I was just building rapport with him, talking to him about the Marine Corps and the Army and guns, and giving him some scenarios about if somebody had your property for a long period of time, you know, their DNA could be on it. Just giving him an out, basically giving him a chance to explain how his round got next to Liberty and between Liberty and Abby's deceased bodies. And at some point, I could tell he is becoming agitated with me, but for the most part, I felt like he was just fishing, trying to get me to tell him what he had, but what we had. But he made some odd comments. There he goes with the odd and the strange or weird. Like I said something about, I don't think you're a bad person, and Kathy doesn't think you're a bad person. And he said, well, what kind of person? K-I double L's, two girls. Which is a perfectly fair question because you've just been accusing him of that. For however long you've been accusing him of that over and over repeatedly, and he's denied it over and over repeatedly, but yet you keep accusing him of something he didn't do. So that would be, you know, on his mind that you're calling him not a bad person, but you think he did this crime. And so he's like, well, what kind of person does that crime? But you just said I'm not a bad guy. So that doesn't prove any guilt. But yet Holman thinks that that means he's guilty for some reason. He says, that was a little disturbing to me. And the time that he met with his wife, I allowed his wife to come in and talk to him. I allowed him to take a smoke break. I allowed him to use the restroom. I got him water. Look at me. I'm such a nice man. I did all those things for him. But when his wife was in there, he was telling her, hey, all you got to do is tell him you need an attorney and they have to let you leave. Don't worry about me. I'm guilty. Just let me deal with it. That he never said that. He never said that. This is an outright lie. He never said, I'm guilty. Just let me deal with it. What was going on through my head? What was going through my head? Don't worry about me. Like, I'm guilty. Just let me deal with it. Was going on through his head. So he's speculating that that's what Richard Allen was thinking in his head. Okay, because he never said that. But Holman's speculating. Richard Allen's thinking, I'm guilty and I'll just deal with this. You go home. You plead, say you need an attorney and they'll let you leave. But let me stay here and deal with this. Does that make sense to you? Would any normal person, I don't know, whatever. An innocent person could also be telling their wife, hey, why don't you just say, all you got to do, get a lawyer, then you can go, and don't worry about me, because she's worried about him. So he's trying to ease her pain and her stress. He's telling her not to worry and to just go home and to not have to deal with this right now. And he's trying to look out for his wife at this point, and that is apparently suspicious to Jerry Holman. Can't make this up, folks. This is what it is. And then he would hold his hands out when he'd get frustrated with me and say, just arrest me, just arrest me. He did that a few times, and I've never had an innocent person do that. I don't know, I don't think I've ever had anybody hold their hands out that many times telling me to arrest them. Well, he was telling you because he didn't have anything more to say to you, because he had asked for a lawyer and you guys didn't give him one, I believe, or at least he had insinuated to it, and they just kept going with the interviews and trying to get some kind of a confession out of him, but he never confessed, and that pissed Gary Holman off. So he said he was going to get a confession one way or another. So he put him in solitary confinement. This is the moment where he's decided, I'm not going to get where I need to go with Richard Allen in this conversation right now. Or maybe not this moment, but he'll get there shortly after this moment. And that's when he decides he's going to frame him or, get that confession in prison. All right, so he would say, just arrest me, blah, blah, blah. And then I told him he had a warrant for his DNA, but before I could get that out, he said, "Yeah, I knew you had a warrant. I knew you were going to arrest me." I'm like, "That's odd. We didn't even know we were going to arrest you today." I take all of this with a grain of salt, by the way. He says, "We were going to get your DNA. We were going to talk to you about this round, and if you could tell us that I loaned this out to Jerry Holman and he go talk to him. He had my gun at that time. And we were following every lead we could to either eliminate him or establish probable cause." Again, he keeps like there's certain pieces of information that are like the narrative that you have to keep spinning. It was either eliminate him or probable cause. You have to keep saying that. So these behaviors were odd to me. And then just observing videos and phone calls and his behavior while he was in jail, he obviously had some mental health issues. So he had mental health issues or he was odd or both. You can't have both. Like you can't have it all these different ways and say these things. Plus, he was also being filmed and watched 24/7 in prison. How would you act or be when you're constantly being filmed and witnessed by somebody? Like somebody standing there in front of your cell and watching you all day, 24/7. Probably not. Probably you wouldn't feel very good. You'd probably become paranoid and act a little odd yourself. Odd, Jerry Holman, odd. He continues on and says, "I won't argue that, but I think he also played that to get what he wanted." So this man has had mental health issues before he even went in and was tortured and treated horribly by ISP and the Department of Corrections. Um, and that's not contested. He had mental health issues. But to say he played them up to get what he wanted, do normal people eat their own feces to get what they want? Is that normal? Like, no. People with mental health issues might do that, who are on high doses of Halidol that it was given to him without his consent in prison by the prison psychologist. All reasons why Richard Allen should be walking free and have millions of dollars in his bank account, and Jerry Holman and Fran Gull, our dishonorable judge, and all the others should be locked in prison. This is the opposite of how things should have been, or how things should be. Anyways, all right. So Kevin continues on. He says, "People talk sometimes since the trial about how certain things were not shared with the jury. And I like to ask you about a couple of those things, and I am quite a bit curious about. You just mentioned this interview you had with Richard Allen. The jury was played a recording of most of that, but not all of it. There were some edits here and there throughout it. And I think the most significant, most noticeable, most jarring edit was there was a time when everybody was just sitting in the room very quiet. I think Richard Allen is looking down, and then there was like a jump cut, and suddenly, like everybody seems to be yelling and upset, and it was very bizarre to watch." Hold on. So I guess some jump cut. I don't know what this is. Some jump cut. Richard Allen looking down, and then there was a jump cut, and suddenly everybody seems to be yelling and upset. And so, can you tell us what was cut out? What happened in that moment that the jury did not get to see? So, there was a moment of this interview cut out, purposely redacted from the jury's eyes, which at some point someone got upset, and it went from calm demeanors to people yelling and being upset with one another. Holman says, "Yeah, I would like to add too on, how mean I was. But there was maybe 20 seconds of me yelling and screaming, and I have a rule of thumb when I interview people. I try to speak their language. 20 seconds of him yelling and screaming. I bet you there was more said and more screams and yelling done in that time frame when can you hold on 1 second? All right. So, yeah, I think there was some screaming and yelling that was taking place in that room, and there's some things that were said that probably would make Jerry Holman look really, really bad. And that's why it was redacted, cut out. They're going to probably blame it on, I don't know, some glitch. He doesn't even say why it was cut out. He doesn't say what happened. He just says there was some yelling and screaming. As a rule of thumb, when I interview people, I like to speak their language. So if they're not cussing at me or cussing while talking to me, I try not to curse at them or use curse words. And if you watch that first part of that interview, the first hour and whatever, I never said a curse word. So that kind of was important because I know everybody's like, "Oh, Jerry Holman's so mean." And I was using tactics to try to elicit information from him. So he knows he knows he was being mean. And this is the answer to what happened to that cutout, by the way. Him being mean. Him being mean and yelling and screaming for 20 seconds was the answer to why there was a cutout that the jury didn't see. That's not an answer. That doesn't tell us what happened to the cutout. That doesn't tell us what happened during that time when the video cut out. But yet, here he is talking, trying to defend himself and say, "I'm not a mean guy, but everybody's calling me this mean guy." See what's going on here? There was yelling and screaming during some part of that interview, and they cut it out on purpose. Probably didn't even give it to the defense and made it seem like that was just a glitch in the system. That's just how our video recorded. Liar. All right, so Anya, moving on. We're almost done. I know this is a long one. Sorry, guys. The second part is going to be a little bit shorter. Plus, we don't have the Court TV video to watch as well. So Anya says, "Why is it important to match somebody's behavior when you're interviewing them?" He says, "I think several reasons. Control." Well, there you have it. Jerry Holman wants control. Tell them, try to, the old, "I'm asking the questions here, it's like I'm in control here. Want to let them be in control. You don't want to let them be in control. Sometimes you do, and you can play off of that. But, we use the deceptive behavior because number one, it's upheld in the Supreme Court, but number two, it elicits responses that lead you to other statements that they make that would indicate that they're involved. Yeah, it leads to this deceptive behavior leads to false confessions. Many, many false confessions. That's the um oh my God, why can't I think of it? The technique, the read technique. Oh my gosh, I couldn't think of the word. Sorry, my brain. It's been a long recording, so my brain's fried. Jerry Holman says that's one, but yeah, I mean it's definitely something that we use. But back to the interview, I had offered Richard Allen an out. I said, "If you're innocent, take a polygraph," and he said no. He's first said that he's done helping us and he's already helped us so much, and he wasn't gonna, give us any more help. Was he asking for a lawyer and saying, I'm not talking anymore? Because at that point, you should have ended the interview. And on to the polygraph. Polygraphs are crap and they don't mean anything. And they're not upheld in all, they're not admissible in a court, in a law, or in a trial. I'm good with words. Um, it's not admissible in trial. So polygraphs are stupid. And why even, okay, I don't know. Just, I know why you would ask as a law enforcement officer, but polygraphs don't hold up in court. And there's a lot of false positives and false negatives. And yeah, it's all subjective. It is not an objective science. All right, so Jerry Holman continues on and says, and he said, well, because I'm on anxiety meds, and I said, we, our polygraph examiners, deal with that all the time. They'll establish a baseline and they'll be able to rule that out. And if you're innocent and you have nothing to hide, you take a polygraph. And during the time that Kathy Allen was in there, I asked her, I said, hey, if I was trying to help you prove your innocence, wouldn't you want to help? And would you, if you were innocent, would you take a polygraph? Now that's just manipulation right there. Why can I not? It doesn't let me like select when I'm trying to select one thing. It looks like I'm selecting something else. All right, so Kathy Allen, yeah, she was there, and he tries to ask her, hey, if I was trying to help you prove your innocence, would you want to help? Wouldn't you do this? Wouldn't you take the polygraph? And of course, I mean, your answer, of course, has to be yes in the way that those questions are phrased. It's like a total manipulation and making it seem like, well, Richard Allen must be guilty if he's not taking the polygraph, which is total and utter horseshit. Gets me worked up. Good thing we're almost done. All right, continuing on. He says, and she said, yes, absolutely, I would. And I said, well, Richard Allen won't. Your husband won't. And something like that. And then he got angry and said, I'm not fucking helping you anymore. And I said, well, you can only help yourself. And then he came out, or, he wanted his wife out of there. And I'm like, Kathy, tell him to do the right thing here, and yelling and screaming a bit, or yelling and screaming a little bit. So that was the basis of it. And then he also tried to put it on me. He said, you're going to pay for this and that. Yeah, you are going to pay for this, Jerry. When all comes out about you and what you did and how you tried to coerce a confession out of Richard Allen, you will pay for this. You are going to pay for this and be sorry for this, because it's a crime to frame an innocent man, especially when you're law enforcement, man. I mean, you cannot be doing this crap. But of course, he makes it about him. He's like, and he turned it around on me. He says, I said, no, I'm not paying for this. You pay for what you've done. And it was obvious I was angry, but again, it was a tactic. I came back calm, put handcuffs on him, made sure they were double. Do you think he really came back calm and put handcuffs on him and made sure that they weren't too tight? No, I don't think so. Made sure they were double locked for his comfort and safety, and they didn't tighten up, and took him to the sheriff's department, and we didn't have heated interactions, any interactions, heated or not. So yeah, it was just some tactics that we use. It's similar to, so he's trying to blame the yelling, the few seconds of yelling that was on the tape. He's blaming it on, oh, it was just a tactic. But really, he is a blowhard. He is not self-aware. He's very unemotionally intelligent, or unintelligent. Emotionally unintelligent. Yes, that's the term. Um, he's he has no idea how he comes off and how he treats other people. And I'm sure that his own actions, he thinks he comes off as this like high and mighty, I do no wrong type of persona, and everybody else is beneath him. It's just ridiculous. And of course, it's going to show. Of course, we're going to notice these things, and it's going to eventually, the truth about who he is going to come out. But anyway, so yeah, I used some tactics there. It's similar to kind of what you, as a parent, you use with your kids. I mean, trying to get them to tell the truth. You try to be deceptive and tell them, you know, that you know more than what you do, or you yell and scream at them. So there you have it. That's what we know he did to Richard Allen. He told Richard Allen he knew more than he actually did, and he yelled and screamed at him and used deception. It just depends on the kid, how they're going to react. So it's not anything that outrageous or not used on a daily basis. And Anya says, so things like anger, raised voices, and deception can be part of a toolkit in an interview that you can deploy strategically to see if you can elicit the reaction. A reaction or some answer. Yeah, I think so. And I think it's taught in interviewing schools and read technique, but you have to use something like, or something that's going to work for your personality too. You can't know. All right, moving on. So things like anger, raised voices, and deception can be part of a toolkit in an interview that you can deploy strategically to see if you can elicit the reaction a reaction or some answer. Sorry, I reread that, but my dog was pacing and annoying me the first time around. So all right, so Jerry Holman says, yeah, I think so. And I think it's taught in interviewing schools and read technique. But you have to use something that's going to work for your personality too. You can't know. I don't think Kevin can come in and just start yelling at people and people might not respond. Anya, on the other hand, you definitely come and yell and scream at people and they would respond, and everybody's different. What? What did he even mean? Okay. So you have to find a technique that's for your personality is going to work with well. And you also have to read the person, yelling at, screaming at people. Some people aren't going to work. They're going to shut down but being super nice to people isn't going to work either. So you got to find that button to push for lack of better terms. And And again, it's not always about getting a confession, it's about getting a response. Yeah, we want confessions, but that didn't happen that didn't happen very often. I make the baseball apology, if you bat 300 in baseball, you're in the Hall of Fame. If you get 3 out of 10 people to confess, you're doing really well. I mean, I think that's you can kind of relate that to people just don't confess to stuff that they don't want people to know about. Or you could also say people don't confess to things that they didn't do, but whatever. But if you can get a confession, great. And these are ways that we try to elicit those. But a lot of those times, it's just to get more information to be able to go follow up and get the, circumstantial evidence or physical evidence you need to prove that they're guilty. Anya says, I wanted to also ask you about polygraphs. Obviously, they're not admissible in court. Why can they be a tool used investigatively, though? Um, like what can they help with in that sense? Holman says, on rare occasions, they can be used, if they're stipulated, you can use them in court, but they don't happen very often. But yeah, it's just another interview process. It's another tool that you can use to, again, elicit responses. I'm not a polygraph examiner by any means, but we've, successfully used polygraphs to get people to give us information that we need to establish the need to be able to get probable cause to get that search warrant or arrest warrant. So, yeah, they're very helpful. Kevin says, I'd like to ask about something else that wasn't shared with the jury. There was a video of Richard Allen at Cass County Jail that the prosecution seemed to really want to share with the jury, and the defense really did not want the jury to see this video. What can you tell us about this video and what it showed? Holman says, I'm not sure why they wanted it or didn't want it, but I think what it would show, they were trying to establish that Richard Allen was this fragile egg. I think the term was used, and we were trying to establish that he was not. And in this particular video that we were trying to get in, Richard Allen was sitting there calm on his bed, and then just from 0 to 100 snapped and just went ballistic, verbally and physically abusive to anybody and everybody around, punching a door, banging his head, yelling and screaming, doing a throat slashing motion, and just terrible behavior. And then, but in a nutshell, and 10 seconds after he calmed down, oh no, I'm fine. I'll sit over here and read my Bible. And I think that just shows the kinds of the kind of person he is, and that the ability that he has to go, off the wall. Or it could mean that he actually has mental health issues, and being in kind of solitary confinement and being observed and monitored 24/7 is making him go a little more insane. Because I would go insane anyways, especially with huge doses of Halidol. You don't know what his medication was at that time, and you are not a mental health professional. So you cannot be telling us what these things mean or what he was doing, or you don't have any right to an opinion, an expert opinion of whether he did this intentionally or was faking his symptoms or not. So shut up, Jerry Holman. Continuing on, he says, and I think that's what probably happened on February the 13th is he got angry and just snapped and wanted to be in control and power, and he took two innocent girls' lives. So I think that was important, but it was too prejudicial to the jury, and I think that's why the judge ruled on it, which is probably the right thing to do. I don't know. I'm pretty confident that she did a lot of right things. But so that's why I think, and that's what it was all about. Anya says, we would like to thank Lieutenant Holman for speaking with us about his experience with the case. We very much appreciate it. Check out the next episode, blah, 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 blah. Okay. We will read part two, or the next episode in part two. So make sure your notification is on and you're subscribed and you hit the like button for me, please, on your way out. I always forget to say that in the beginning. So please hit the like button if you got anything out of value of this video. Thank you so much for watching with me and reading along with me. I know this one was a long one. The next one will be a little bit shorter, but anyways, yeah, I thought we got some really good information from Jerry Holman's odd press press or media tour part one. So we will continue discussing it in part two. So take care, guys, and I will see you in the next one. Bye now.